Nutrimedical Report, and we have Clay Crossan joining us in just a moment. And, of course, wanted to remind you that this coming Friday, which is Good Friday, right through the following Monday, we have our 7 for Heaven sale. And it is going to be a pretty amazing sale because we have 7% off even their sale prices and multi-packs, and everything is free shipping. Clay, welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
We're making a lot of progress in terms of functional medicine. I know we've been working on Nutrimeds a lot, and we're also updating some of the names of our products and some of our new products that are coming down the pike. One of them that'll be probably later this summer, early fall, will be the avian immunoglobulin product, which we're working on. We have some remarkable results. In fact, it's interesting when I talked to Michelle this morning, she said a lot of our people, believe it or not, are word of mouth. And it turns out this morning, like many mornings on Monday, people call Michelle to place orders because they know she'll be there the full day rather than being out just part of the day. And a lot of our people haven't even listened to the show. They just know their friend got better, so they call us and they get better and they tell their friend. I mean, the proof is in that you're getting better without drugs. In fact, I heard from a South Korean nurse who's actually in New Mexico just this morning, and she wants to have a whole network of people because she wants to use non-pharmaceutical treatments to get people well. And I don't like to use the word cure because I think the word cure should never be used by anybody. If you're cured, it means you're never going to get sick again or die, which I think is kind of silly. And even if we gave you a life extension so you didn't have senescence, you'll probably die of a gamma burst, a meteorite, or World War III, 4, 5, or 6, or whatever it is. So the average person with our current actuarial tables will be 476 years old, and only one person in 10,000 would live 10,000 years even if you never aged. Isn't that interesting?
Mm-hmm.
So the idea of living forever is only in eternity, even if you lived in a body that never aged. Ha-ha. And depending on how dangerous the world you live in, it could be very short lifespan, but you'll look good when you die as long as you aren't blown up or burnt. So let's get into it. I always like when you select nutraceuticals, pick some new ones now. Because I know sometimes, in fact, it was funny, I think a few weeks ago, you and Ryan, because Ryan follows you, picked, I think, 2 or 3 of the same nutraceuticals, and he gives a little different twist on them. But I'd like you to pick some that you think we haven't talked about in a while that are particularly important for people to understand their use. And then I'll throw a couple in.
Yeah, you got it. Well, I know thyroid issues, especially hypothyroid, is always a big issue for a lot of the listeners and within the general population. I don't know, but statistically, how many people typically have hypothyroid issues, Doc?
Yeah.
How many? What would you say
hypothyroidism, I think what people should understand is thyroid. It's more complex than people think.
Mm-hmm.
To give you an example of hypothyroidism, there's really 3 different types of hypothyroidism. The first type is autoimmune hypothyroidism, where you have antimicrosomal antibodies, that's the endoplasmic reticulum, and antithyroglobulin, which attacks the globulin that your thyroid makes, and then shaves off the T4 and T3 and T2 reverse T2 molecules by different points of what's called outer ring or inner ring deiodination. Most doctors don't know this biochemistry significantly enough, including endocrinologists, to understand that your body has a tremendous range of nutraceuticals, for thyroid molecules. The most important is T3. It's 4,000 times more attached to the special receptor of the crystal gallia of the mitochondria. It's like the ignition key for your mitochondria. T4 is not a hormone. It's a pro-hormone. It has to have outer ring deiodination. Then there's 7 minerals, most importantly selenium. In our society, 97% of the soil is very selenium depleted. So most people in our culture have virtually no selenium. They also have low vanadium and chromium. And I'll give an example how thyroid is also tied to diabetes. Every person that's diabetic has type 2 hypothyroidism. That's the second type, where you actually have adequate T4 and T3, or maybe even low, but you have adequate, let's say, in the average person, if you measure their free T4 and free T3, but they have an elevated reverse thyroid hormone, RT3. RT3 has the inner ring deiodination, and it locks on the receptor, but it irreversibly binds it, so it actually prevents the T3 from getting in the receptor to turn on your mitochondria. So you can literally give people intravenous reverse T3 and put them in suspended animation. So you want to do deep space travel, you do a deep 3, either transdermal or IV, and they would basically, their metabolism will slow down. Their core body temperature will probably drop into the 80s or 70s. And it's one of the treatments that I would recommend that we probably should have is with a reverse T3 injection for the acute cardiac arrest and brain trauma so a person doesn't die, because when you shut off their mitochondria, they can't get oxidative stress. It's when the mitochondria continue whizzing along. Now, what the body does when you have thyroid, and why it's tied to diabetes, is that, and this is, again, for all you doctors out there, because this is part of the class, you're now in session, a lot of people think that sugar is the central problem in diabetes. They're wrong. What do you think is the cause of diabetes and why it's tied to thyroid? Well, the primary thing, and the University of California, San Diego published this in February of last year. I'm trying to get their doctors on my program to talk about the research. They found that LTB4, or leukotriene B4, is the primary thing that shuts off the insulin sensitivity and leptin sensitivity receptors. Now, leukotriene B4 is an inflammatory cytokine, but what triggers off LTB4? It's singlet oxygen and hydroperoxy and nitroperoxy radical. And what causes that? It's the loss of superoxide dismutase caused by loss of selenium and other protective enzymes. When you lose SOD, you also lose nitric oxide synthase. Your blood vessels can't pump properly, so you get microcirculation problems, neuropathies, vascular disease, hypoxia, cancer, autoimmune diseases. So the primary cause of diabetes is actually a loss of SOD1, superoxide dismutase 1, believe it or not. And when that happens, you get LTB4. And the reason why LTB4 is interesting is because it's your body's compensation, because when you get free radicals floating around your body, the best patch to grab those free radicals is, guess what? Starts with S and ends with R. It's called sugar. So your body actually tries to drive your sugar up to literally protect yourself from being burnt. Think of it as sugar as fire retardant. Okay? So when the doctors chase your blood sugar and they don't lower your hemoglobin A1C or your free radical levels, because you can measure those with T-bars, which is oxidized fatty acids or oxidized DNA called 8-hydroxy-2'-deoxyguanosine, the doctors are completely wrong-headed. They should be not only lowering insulin, but lowering insulin and leptin resistance. So we used leptin metabolic, diabetoline, and glycemics to lower insulin, because anything that's insulinogenic is going to cause more insulin resistance. So in other words, the other factor that causes insulin resistance is rapidly absorbed sugar. Because when you get really high insulin, the body becomes more insulin resistant. But the primary cause of the insulin resistance is inflammatory cytokines caused by singlet oxygen because you've lost SOD1. Interesting, eh?
Yeah.
Now, so when doctors are chasing it, what they should be looking is oxidative stress. The diabetics have 6 times the rate of cancer, heart disease, vascular incidents like deep vein thrombosis, cardiac arrest. Alzheimer's disease is basically diabetes of the brain, where their metabolism gets so affected that the astrocytes can form a firing neural network. Now, if you're a doctor out there, you haven't learned this in medical school or residency, what I'm telling you. I've been doing research on this now for more than a third of a century. And when I did make my discoveries in hyperinsulinemia, I was persecuted and threatened with having my license pulled. But I'm preparing a paper and a book this year that's going to unveil all of my research, most of it unpublished. And it's going to have scientific markers that scientists can go back and check my theory, which could be easily proven with specific tests. And this is why my nutraceutical approach to cancer is very different. For example, in diabetes, you've got to use things like Nutritrala to get rid of singlet oxygen, because it recycles your fat and water-soluble antioxidants. You have to use carnosine. You have to use Regenerex. It stimulates the PGC1 alpha and the leukotriene pathways, etc. So this is very serious, isn't it?
It is. I'm glad what an education just received, and so it's important nutritionally. The hypothyroid or support it would be
right. So
the mitothyroid. I really highly recommend that.
Right now, you're not only correcting thyroid, but whenever you have stress, the primary thing that counteracts insulin when it's high is cortisol. So everybody that has elevated insulin levels also have elevated stress hormones, cortisol, and their adrenal glands are in overdrive. So if you don't modulate that by adrenal support, you end up with hypercortisolemia or hypo. After that little discussion, now, how do you support, number one, lowering insulin resistance versus leptin metabolic and diabetoline and glycemics? Those are the 3 biggies. We can add chromium cruciferate and biotin plus, and we can use leptin metabolic that actually will help to mobilize fat out of fat storage. And to turn off what's called inflammatory fat, because it turns out inflammatory cytokines like leukotriene B4 is reduced by using forskolin, Coleus forskolii, 2 capsules twice a day, and leptin metabolic and lipoflush, which is conjugated linoleic acid. Even if you don't diet, you'll lose weight just with CLA. But it also lowers the inflammatory cytokines that are the factor that causes insulin resistance. So conjugated linoleic acid and forskolin, diabetoline, glycemics, and especially leptin metabolic, because it's a glycosaminoglycan fragment from your joints. And it makes teleological sense. When you exercise, you release this into your blood, which actually changes your sensitivity to insulin and leptin, which controls your appetite in your brain. So it's interesting, vitamin X, or exercise, modulates your appetite through fragments of the glycosaminoglycans from the cartilage in your joints. Is that cool or what?
Mm.
And when you take it, it actually lowers insulin leptin resistance. Now, on the other hand, you got to stop the free radical damage. That's why in diabetics, I tell them they need to be on Nutrimedical, Regenerex, and cell detox glutathione, and they should take carnosine as well. We also can get from our European agencies some other molecules that I use for diabetes, like aminoguanidine. But the most important is simply Nutrimedical, Regenerex, cell detox glutathione, and 69% of the population in California, according to UCLA, are diabetic or pre-diabetic. If you look at the Western world, and you actually use parameters that we did when I was working with Dr. Otto Hune, head of pathology, 36 years ago, University of Calgary, we brought the test from Germany and set up the first protocol in history to look at insulin glucose tolerance tests. But I measured cortisol, prolactin, T3, reverse T3, and I discovered a number of things. Firstly, when people get what's called postprandial or post-meal, we call adrenal insufficiency syndrome, or postprandial, they feel like the bottom's dropping out. Their blood sugar may not be dropping, but they may have no detectable cortisol. And we actually measured cortisol levels, and we couldn't detect it. Many people had precisely the same time they had symptoms. So when some people think they have hypoglycemia, your primary thing that's counteracting insulin is cortisol. So if you have unopposed cortisol, the insulin is going to make you feel awful. And of course, what your body does when it doesn't have cortisol, it dumps out a whole pile of adrenaline and noradrenaline, because that's the only thing that will keep your blood sugar from hitting the floor. And when it hits the floor, first thing that goes on is you lose your color vision. Then you start feeling faint and dizzy and nauseated. And then finally, you I call it face plant. So if somebody's getting hypoglycemic spells, the most common thing is actually they're having a surge of adrenaline and noradrenaline, which will cause panic attack and depression. But it actually is a drop in cortisol because they have nothing counteracting their insulin. And insulin is usually high. That's a pre-diabetic condition, by the way. If somebody has those symptoms, 5, 10, or 20 years down the road, they're going to turn frankly diabetic. That's a fact. Now, how much of our population is doing that? Virtually all of us. This is an epidemic beyond proportion, beyond anything else in our society, is diabetes. And pre-diabetic changes are occurring in the entire population. Interesting, eh?
Yeah.
That's why we're seeing MODY, or mature onset diabetes of the young. We never saw it back in the 70s. We see it now in children when they're 10, 12, 14 years of age. And if they die traumatically, we see the same kind of fatty streaks in their blood vessels as if they're a 65, 75-year-old back in the 1970s. We never saw it before. This is new. Interesting, eh? So that's why when I tell people if you're diabetic, you have to take Nutrimedical. You got to take cell detox glutathione and Regenerex and maybe cell defense, because you're living in a free radical soup inside your blood vessels and your tissues. And that's one of the primary things. Leukotriene B4 is triggered by that, and that makes your body more resistant to insulin, which will drive your sugar higher. All the sugar is a marker to tell you that your body is using as a fire return to turn out the fire. In other words, it's like the fire marshal comes by and he says, I need more foam. Well, the foam is sugar. So your body's going to adjust hormones to make sure you make more sugar, even if you use gluconeogenesis from your liver and turn your proteins in your liver overnight into sugar to turn off the fire. Is that interesting or what? So when people look at diabetes, they're looking at it from the wrong end of the tube. They think diabetes is a sugar problem when that's not the primary issue. Interesting, eh?
Yeah.
Sugar is actually being used as a body to rescue because it's the best first patch. It's not a perfect one. The best first patch to grab singlet oxygen. And it causes a secondary thing called RAGE, or reactive advanced glycosylation end products. But sugar isn't the primary problem in diabetes. And when you give somebody more insulin, which I had a consult this morning with somebody, their doctors were going to be knuckleheads and give this person more insulin or drugs to raise insulin, that compounds the problem and makes more free radicals. So if your doctor wants to do that, fire your doctor and get the heck away from them. You need to be on nutraceuticals or drugs, and there are drugs like glucophage and some other drugs that lower glucagon, so your body doesn't make more sugar. But anything that raises your blood insulin is bad, including aspartame, Splenda. Stevia is okay, and just like sugar, we call natural sweeteners. But Splenda and aspartame raise your blood insulin more than sugar. Isn't that interesting? So
yeah, it is.
Highly absorbed carbohydrates are bad too. They're like, rocket fuel. That causes free radicals. As soon as you take a huge amount of, let's say, candy bars, soda pop, and so on, your free radical level in your tissues goes skyrocket. Interesting, hey?
Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah, so when you hear doctors talking about this, the problem is 99.99% of doctors are not scientists first. They can't make their way around inside a biochemical pathway if their life depended on it. It's a fact. Yeah. They cannot think linear and deal with dozens of independent, we call drivers of a nonlinear equation of how things work. And what I laid out here is pretty simple, isn't it? It's like, and I can give doctors validated markers to actually measure my theory and say, you know what? How many diabetics does their doctor measure their T-bars, their oxidative markers like 8-hydroxy 2-deoxyguanosine, their fasting blood sugar in the morning, fasting blood insulin in the morning, and first morning glucagon? How many doctors do it? None. None. Do you know why? They're ignorant. Now, it may be offensive to them. Tough luck, Doc. I'm retired now, and I don't care. I don't have a state license in this state or anywhere else. I am enraged by the stupidity of the health professionals. And I'm not talking about just doctors. I'm talking about MDs, naturopaths, chiropractors, whatever. Because they all still approach things in a linear commando way instead of looking at the nonlinears. For example, when a chiropractor manipulates the joint, guess what regulates the joint? The muscle firing pattern of the muscle. What regulates the muscle? The skin, the Langerhans complex that regulates the pain gate in the skin. And if you don't deal with those early factors, the force factors across the joints are just going to pop it right back out again. So even the chiropractors take an approach that in their realm is the same as the doctors that want to give more insulin. You got to deal with the muscles, and you got to deal with the sensory A delta and C fiber nerves, and the feedback control system of the pain projectors in the skin and the other 6 pain gates. You don't hear this, though, do you, in the regular media? You don't hear this even in the alternative medicine or chiropractic or naturopathic because they don't know. But I can give them specific points to prove it, like our sensory nerve mapping with the Axon 2 nerve pathology scanner that I developed with Dr. Jim Hedgecock, FDA approved in '97. So, if you're diabetic or if you're hypothyroid, and again, by the way, every diabetic has type 2 hypothyroidism. Every woman with polycystic ovarian syndrome has hypothyroidism. Every person with chronic fatigue syndrome has hypothyroidism. Everyone. And adrenal dysfunction. Everyone.
Mitothyroid.
Are you?
The best way, by the way, to listen to the program is just to go to our web link. I've just fixed up the links on the front page of Nutrimedical. So the MP3s, the Listen Live, the YouTube channel, the live stream links are all there. And it makes it really easy for you to find out exactly how to listen. Just go boom, hit the button. We also have a listen radio line and a call-in number. That's 800-259-5791. But if you go to our listen phone number, you can actually listen to the program basically anywhere. That call-in phone number just to listen to the program is 605-562-4096. And again, the call-in number, which is every hour except the first hour on Fridays when Michelle is answering your questions by call-in or by email, is 800-259-5791. I want to get back to talking about different nutraceuticals and protocols because I find it very instructive to kind of explain how we do this. Ryan, do we have you all set up? Don't think we have Ryan yet. Our board op is tracking Ryan. Okay, hi Ryan. How you doing? Good. You're a busy guy. In the last segment, we were talking with 2 segments. We were talking with Clay about hypothyroidism and diabetes and how they're tied together. For example, every diabetic and pre-diabetic is a type 2 hypothyroid. They also have adrenal dysfunction. They also have free radical problems. In other words, every person who has diabetes This is research from University of California, San Diego, has leukotriene B4. That's triggered off by free radicals, which is why we always tell people to take Nutrimedical if they're Regenerex and cell detox glutathione. And when you do that, the free radicals, and this is why singlets, basically rapidly absorbed sugar is bad, and anything that drives up blood insulin is bad, because insulin lowers IGF-1 if you raise insulin levels. And when you lower IGF-1, you actually also knock out superoxide dismutase to protect yourself from free radicals, and you lose also nitric oxide synthase, so your circulation shot. So sugar is bad, but the other thing that's bad is that sugar itself is, the body's actually compensating to dump out more sugar by raising insulin resistance, because sugar is the best fire retardant for free radicals. In other words, it's the best thing to grab it when you don't have the enzymes like superoxide dismutase 1, glutathione peroxidase. That's why we have things like our Minerals Plus that has selenium. We have things like ultrathymine B1 that's very important. We've got BioLVR that has B6. B6 is really important for getting rid of free radicals. If you don't have B6, it's one of the risk factors, or single nucleotide polymorphisms, that's tied directly to diabetes, is B6 polymorphisms, as well as other polymorphisms that are present in, we call, more commonly in people that become diabetic. But the primary driver is free radicals, and free radicals cause leukotriene B4. Leukotriene B4 causes the insulin resistance and the loss of leptin sensitivity. And of course, we've got leptin metabolic, we've got diabetoline, we've got glycemics, we've got biotin plus. So no one should rush toward getting either drugs or shots of insulin to treat their diabetes. And the doctors that do this are criminally insane. They're rushing toward giving the person more insulin when it's one of the problems that actually compounds the disease. Right?
Couldn't agree more, Dr. Bill.
Yeah. So tell us, what are your favorite nutraceuticals today?
Well, when you give, speeches like that, I mean, I have to, at least say Nutrimedical has got to be one of the top things to use, just because people have often heard about alpha lipoic acid and the benefits that can be had, but they've often not seen those benefits occur, and there's two major reasons why that occurs. One, they're not getting anywhere near the dose level they need to achieve the results. Many people need at least 1,200 milligrams, and in some cases maybe higher. And secondarily, the bioavailability, people don't understand the half-life of alpha lipoic acid is very short, 27 minutes. So that means unless you're going to take your alpha lipoic acid about every hour and a half to 2 hours throughout the day, you're probably going to lose a ton of benefit from your alpha lipoic acid.
Right.
And that's not the case with Nutrimedical. It's groundbreaking, because it allows the half-life to be extended close to 80 minutes and delivers 600 milligrams of ALA per dose. And so by doing that, it's very easy to take 2 a day and get into these therapeutic amounts, 1,200 milligrams a day, and avoid the issues that a lot of people suffer from, which would be lowering, a glycemic crash. And in some cases, as you take high levels of alpha lipoic acid, what you end up doing is you get a lot of burning sensation, down in your throat due to the acidic nature of it, and those things are neutralized and not a problem when you're using the Nutrimedical formula.
Right. In other words, ALA is a little bit irritating to the esophagus if you don't take it in a long-release, slow-release form. The other, of course, ones are Regenerex. It's a gene stimulant for PGC1 alpha and NF-kappa 2. It also is very important for regulation of free radicals, and of course we use of course cell detox glutathione and carnosine, which is basically a delinker. In fact, I've changed the name to carnosine delink because it's actually delinks your cross-linked proteins that are caused by sugar, which is grabbing the free radicals because it's a real good patch. In fact, a lot of people think sugar is the devil. In fact, it's the body compensating for free radicals, dumping out sugar. Interesting, hey?
Yeah, I mean, I think people don't know any of this stuff that you're talking about, Dr. Cole.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of the thing that is interesting, and we give people nutraceutical protocols. Their hemoglobin A1C drops, which means their free radical load drops, their vascular disease drops, their blood pressure normalizes, their stress levels, so they're more calm and they're not under what we call fight or flight. A lot of times people have sleep disturbances that are pre-diabetic and diabetic because their adrenal glands are in overdrive. They're dumping out noradrenaline and adrenaline. And if you look at their serum salivary cortisol, it's not normal. They're not a normal pattern. And they wonder, why am I taking a whole lot of either natural or drug sleep meds? And why am I not, why am I always tense or depressed? It's because they're in a metabolic storm. And part of that storm is free radicals and blood sugar and everything else, but the sugar is only part of the whole process. It's actually, when rapid sugar occurs, it creates free radicals, but when it's present in a higher level, it actually acts as a best patch, just like cholesterol is the best patch for damaged endothelial lining. That's why when your cholesterol grabs free radicals, it turns into oxidized cholesterol or 9-ornyl hydroxycholesterol. And when macrophages eat it, along with oxidized fatty acids, or we call trans fats, they die and become foam cells, which create plaque. So we know all the biochemistry of why people get heart disease and why it's more common in diabetics and pre-diabetics. But doctors don't connect this to their clinical practice, do they?
No, they don't.
Yeah,
Sure don't.
Pretty darn disturbing. Okay, so what other favorite ones do you have?
I like using something like Calm Mind. Calm Mind, and it plays right into this because, one, we know that a lack of things like myo-inositol can be a problem for blood sugar regulation, particularly if the condition is something like PCOS type issue. But the Calm Mind is so great because a lot of people, when you hear them talking, they go, I'm with you. I want to control blood sugar. The number one thing I'd like to do is control my cravings.
Right.
And that's a very tough thing for a lot of people to do. And they don't realize that it's not just willpower. They literally have a deficiency that's causing the neurotransmitters not to communicate properly. So when your body's saying, hey, look, we actually don't need to eat sugar right now, but you're going, I absolutely need to eat sugar right now. If we can get that communication balanced, and that's what Calm Mind can do for a lot of individuals. So it's used as fundamental for anxiety type issues, people that have high stress, high cortisol levels. But along with that, if you're a person that has a lot of cravings at particular times of the day, let's say that's at night, a lot of people have that. It could be alcohol, it could be carbohydrate, sugar type issues. What you want to do is just take a couple scoops of the Calm Mind, and usually 20 minutes later, you're definitely different. You don't think about things the same way, and that is a real break for a lot of people.
Well, a lot of people don't realize that elevated cortisol, which is tied with reversing it with Calm Mind, and adrenal support, these two work together to lower what's called hyperadrenalism, which is tied directly to people with hyperinsulinemia. Your adrenal hormones are abnormal when your insulin's high, and that when you bring down the cortisol. You want to tell me about the next break?
Yeah, I can send you an email on it too.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so Ryan, this is, by the way, the spring. This is allergy season. And a lot of people don't realize, the first thing that they should realize, there's usually a secondary infection in their sinus cavities or nose. So I recommend Allison Med, number one, at least a capsule twice a day, for what I call nasal hygiene, and Silver 100 nasal spray. But Allergon and Allerblock are unique. The Allergon, of course, is the antihistamine that actually gets rid of histamine. It's the first and only enzyme that will do this in the world. And Allerblock is a natural antihistamine. It's not going to interfere with your drugs like some other antihistamine drugs are actually interfered with, because they can actually interfere with the phase 2 detox pathway, like the 2D4, 3A6, whatever pathways, in the liver. And you can actually raise blood levels of some drugs, like your cardiac drugs, so sitting with some drug antihistamines. You won't get that with Allerblock. It's a natural antihistamine. It works wonderfully. And then Allergon, and then, of course, high-dose Power C, which will stabilize your membranes very, very nicely. So let's talk about these for a minute, because it's the season to start sneezing.
That's a good way to say it. Yeah,
the season to start sneezing.
Yeah. Are critical for people that have suffered a lot of different allergy challenges, and distinguishing things like the Allerblock. When you're looking at a formulation like that, what you're trying to do is stabilize the mast cells from degranulating, which is then causing a lot of mucus production, and giving all that itchiness and so forth, because histamine is being released throughout the body. And we often know those patients by the ones that it's seasonal. And so a formulation like the Allerblock is going to be something that you can utilize aggressively at first, but then you can kind of just use it as needed, during the seasons that are a challenge for your body. Allergon, on the other hand, that's where we're looking at a formulation where, if this has been plaguing issues like maybe it's environmental, more food-based substances, and it's sort of coming at you from lots of different directions, you're not sure how to control it. This one's critical because this is the enzyme that's a histamine regulator known as diamine oxidase. And diamine oxidase is an enzyme we all produce in our bodies, but we have leaky gut. Our gut is damaged. We have dysbiosis. Lots of exposure to, alcohol, sugar, medications, and things like that, stress. Then what happens is we shift that balance, and we end up with this, quote, leaky gut and less DAO. And so that means we get overwhelmed by histamine, which it's not just from food, it's just all around us, from the stress levels we have to how our immune system is working, and we need to get that enzyme back working. Just like we'd want to use an enzyme to break down protein or carbohydrates, the same thing is necessary when it comes to regulation of histamine in the body. So you can use these formulations in conjunction with one another, but usually they're home runs for people because both of these solutions oftentimes have been lacking, and people are stuck using medications that make them drowsy or have other side effects that they really would like to avoid.
Right. Yeah, that's really pretty neat, isn't it? So what's your next favorite?
Oh, shakes.
In fact, I had an interesting story just before you do your intro on this.
Go ahead.
We have a gentleman this morning who's in his late 70s, and he got in contact with a friend of his that got really good results with their nutraceuticals. So he has never listened to the program, but he's an avid order. Every Monday he'll call in, or every couple of weeks he'll talk to Michelle and reorders for his wife, who is never getting better with all the polypharmacy and all the natural things she got elsewhere. And what she takes, and all she takes is a combination 3 times a day of Ageless, Life Support, and Glycemics. And all of her symptoms are better, and she's doing fantastic 5 years later. So that's a good intro to your drinks. Yep. So people say, I don't want to take pills. Don't take pills. Just take our drinks.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, including myself, I mean, you've either taken a lot of pills, you're tired of it, or you've just never been into it in the first place, and that's totally understandable. It's not the most natural thing to just want to swallow a bunch of pills.
Right, but the other way to do it is
drink something that tastes really good, has wonderful mouthfeel, easy to use with either adults or kids, and that is when we're talking about these shakes, like, as you said, Ageless. Ageless is a wonderful shake when the immune system is fairly weak, and as we talk about the gut lining, it's probably weakened, and they're having trouble detoxifying in the body. And so what's neat about Ageless is it's really focused detoxification-wise as a primary, what they call phase 2 detoxifier, using sulforaphane glucosinolates that are broccoli seed extracts. That's a really very cool formula. I know that's Michelle's first one if she's going to put anything in a shake. That's it. And then number 2, a product like Life Support. Now, Life Support is like a reset button for the whole body, and this is where a lot of people need to be. They're coming into summer season and stuff. They're like, I need to get my body feeling good. I want to look better. This is a way to kind of do it all at one time because it's working very aggressively at helping to regulate the inflammatory processes, regulation of phase 1, phase 2, help with the leaky gut issues, and really get this body back on track quickly.
Right.
And so when there's a lot of multidimensional problems, Life Support is the one to go to. Now, if it's just more blood sugar-related, weight management type issues, a lot of people would steer towards using Glycemic Meal. And Glycemic Meal is all designed around helping to blunt the glycemic impacts of the food you're going to eat throughout the day. And so the shake can work as a meal replacement, but at the same time, the nutrients that are involved in the shake are also supporting you throughout the day to blunt. And when I say blunt, it's like a perpetual wave that is crashing in your body. Every time you eat food or drink something that's got sugar in it or it's not necessarily the healthiest thing for you, you're going to have these waves that are causing a glycemic impact like Dr. Bill was talking about earlier. And so the shake and the nutrients that are in the shake change that. It's like putting up a breakwater, if you will, so the waves can't slam you as hard. And because years and years of getting slammed, and we all know what happens. Our brains don't work well. We're high-risk cardiovascular disease. We're high-risk for abnormal cell development. We're going to get heavy. We're going to get diabetes. And there you go.
Right, and the interesting thing is that the entire population is moving in that direction. And also, by the way, when people are under high stress, they're more prone to also get addicted to whether it's alcohol, drugs, etc. And if you look at a number of high-stress people, say in Hollywood, if you see the before and after deterioration if they get on drugs, it's amazing. And again, it's tied back to a lot of these other factors that tie to nutrition, free radical and blood sugar control and so on, and the fact that they become addictable because their whole system is awash with stress hormones.
Yeah, and that's where we go back to, again, Calm Mind. What a great formulation because, look, stress isn't going anywhere. And your perception of stress, though, can certainly change. And Calm Mind helps you to handle that,
without sedating yourself, keeping you highly functional and making you perform like you want to. Those are wonderful to even put into the shake if you want to as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, one of the things I think, what about the next kind of things? What about arthritis? So it's very badly treated by conventional doctors. What would you recommend in terms of our NutriMeds for that?
Well, if it's kind of the early stages, if we're talking about the progression, the metabolic progression of things like osteoarthritis and so forth, joint performance is a formulation that's been clinically studied in bringing down the inflammatory markers within the actual synovial fluid. And so, if you want to think about this in a guy terminology, it's like an oil change in the joint capsule. And so, if the oil's not changed often, right? We'll just say every 5,000 miles, it starts getting a loss of viscosity. And so, basically, instead of it being frictionless like ice on ice, we're starting to create inflammatory markers that are then ending up damaging our tissue, and so we don't get ice on ice. And many of us can attribute, and say, hey, yeah, it doesn't feel like ice on ice when I walk upstairs or bend down. And you can go out and play on the weekends and go, man, I don't respond like I used to when I was in my 20s or 30s. That's the progression that's going on. You need to intervene. But unfortunately, just taking a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug is not intervening. You may delay your perception of pain. You have absolutely not delayed the breakdown of tissue that's going on in the body. And that's one of the big damaging things is people are disconnecting, by turning off the pain signaling, like putting black tape on a warning light on your dashboard. That's what they're typically doing. And they're going, well, I guess the problem's not there anymore. Oh, it's there, and it's continuing, and you've got to intervene. And so something like Joint Performance is a really wonderful formulation. And then when you want to use something like Cell Defense, the bioactive curcuminoids, along with that, what a great, healthy way to, again, bring down that sensitivity to inflammation and control that inflammation without having to blunt the healing process in the body at the same time.
Exactly. Yeah. Amazing stuff. Well, thank you, Ryan. We will be back in a minute for a few more segments, and you get a break. I guess you're off to, we'll see you again after the next half hour next Monday. But maybe we'll touch on some of the new nutraceuticals that are in the works that are going to be coming down the line here for Nutrimedical when we come back. So let's talk on the break for a minute.